That's a solid performance for an old fart like you.
With the arrival of the next generation of consoles, it's not surprising that a lot of people are getting excited about the possibilities the new hardware is offering. While there is a lot of cool stuff on the horizon, from the looks of things, a lot of bad habits we had in games this gen are already seeping over to the next one. As far as I'm concerned, one of the most annoying aspects of this generation of consoles has been the drop in performance. With the jump to the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox last gen, we saw a great amount of effort put into making games run at optimal speeds. A plethora of titles ran at 60 frames per second with minimal performance hiccups like screen tearing. This didn't just mean games looked really great in motion, but most importantly it resulted in super smooth gameplay. This was because most devs knew the limitations of the systems they were working with and were capable of getting the most out of them without hampering performance if it wasn't necessary. In the current generation though, this is rarely the case, with almost every game in the last 7 years transcending its system's constraints for no discernible reason, resulting in almost everything running pretty much like crap. I'd say this is because developers are more keen to make their games look really pretty at the cost of performance, something that suffers heavily since the PS3 and 360 aren't really up to running this high-res wizardry at a good click. But that's almost laughable to say, since a lot of games that run abhorrently still look really bad. 60 frames per second is the ideal standard for optimum gameplay, but that standard has quickly deteriorated down to 30, except maybe in specialized genres such as fighting games, where keeping the frame rate at 60 is pretty much a necessity. This is definitely not ideal, but when it comes to non-action focused games, it's not unbearable. With that said, even 30 frames seems to be something most titles have trouble pulling off, with many of them falling well into the low 20s. It's somewhat easier to look over such hiccups if a game is really trying to push the envelope. Shadow of the Colossus, for example, ran pretty schizophrenically back on the PS2, but its ambition to put giant 100-foot monsters on screen for the player to fight was kind of a good enough excuse for the game to perform a little inconsistently. However, this generation I don't see hardly any games trying to push anything substantive like this that requires their engines to perform so badly. The only reason we seem to be dealing with such problems is because the devs want to make their games output-intensive graphics, which, as I said before, doesn't even result in a lot of these games looking very appealing anyway. At the end of the day, it's better for a game to run good than to have fancy graphics. It's unfortunate then that so many reviewers are way more likely to praise the latter than the former in their critiques. I mean, how unsexy is it to have to say in a review that something doesn't look quite as good because it's actually trying to perform properly? Whether it's the use of shoddy engines, overexertion of hardware, or just simple incompetence at the hands of the creators, it's clear that this issue has been rampant this generation, and from what I'm seeing from the next one, it doesn't look too likely to change. There's already a myriad of next-gen games confirmed to be running at low frame rates, with many of them not even providing 1080p resolutions as a trade-off. Seriously, if this is all we're getting out of a next-gen system, then you have to wonder what's even the point of using one. Does it not boggle anybody else's mind that somehow, even though we're supposedly using far more advanced technology, that our games have dropped over 50% in performance? Clearly though, when a company wants to market a game, a good frame rate isn't necessary. Video sites like YouTube, where most people see game trailers these days, only output their videos at 30 frames per second anyway. Even this video you're watching now can only show footage at that rate. But when it comes to actually playing a given title at 60 FPS opposed to 30 FPS, the difference is night and day. All the major elements of real-time gameplay tie back to how well a game can run. Not to mention they just tend to look pretty nasty when this pivotal facet is neglected. Of course, if one has access to a high-end PC, then this whole thing probably isn't such a big deal. It's the best place to play most multi-platform games this gen just because they run somewhat efficiently with the unrestricted horsepower a computer can offer. I play a lot of games on home consoles because there are a large variety of titles I simply can't get anywhere else. But if the next generation of gaming keeps up the trend the current one has, those exclusive titles will probably be the only games I'll be playing on these new machines. The core of a game is gameplay, and the smoother a game runs, the better that gameplay is. And if the majority of titles ran better 2 generations ago, then I don't see why we're even bothering making these new consoles at all.